Good afternoon, everyone. So for our group, we will be discussing R17, which is Practical Ethics, Equality for Animals by Peter Singer. For an overview of our presentation, we will be discussing Chapter 3, Equality for Animals. We will be discussing racism and speciesism. Speciesism in practice, and under that would be animals as food, experimenting on animals. How do we know animals can feel pain? Animals eat each other, so why shouldn't we eat them? Ethics and reciprocity, differences between humans and animals, and defending species. So let's start on our topics. First off, we have racism and speciesism. So here, principle of consideration of interest extends to humans. So the fact that some people are not members of our race does not entitle us to exploit them. And the fact that some people are less intelligent than others does not mean that their interest may be discounted or disregarded. So Bentham also points the capacity of suffering. So this has the vital characteristic that entitles a being to equal consideration. So if a being is not capable of suffering or of experiencing enjoyment or happiness, there is nothing to be taken into account. This is why the limit of sentience is the only defensible boundary of concern for the interest of others. Human species do not accept that pain is bad when it is felt by pigs or mice as when it is felt by humans. So moving on, speciesism in food. So animal as food. The modern agricultural industry often subjects animals to miserable conditions, treating them as mere objects for production. Even when animals are allowed to graze freely, ethical questions remain regarding their use for food. While some may argue for humane practices, ensuring the well-being of animals is challenging on the scale required by urban populations. Supporting the current system of animal production perpetuates cruelty and contradicts the principle of equal consideration of interest. Transitioning away from animal products, especially in urban settings, aligns more closely with ethical principles and acknowledges the importance of animal welfare.
Okay, so moving on, experimenting on animals. The area in which speciesism can most clearly be seen is the use of the animals in experiments. Peter Singer said that the experimenters often claim that the experiments lead us to discover about humans. People sometimes think that all animal experiments serve vital medical purposes and can be justified on the grounds that they relieve more suffering than they cause. This comfortable belief is often mistaken. An example of animal testing that is still being used today is the LD50, which is designed in the 1920s to find the lethal dose or the level of consumption that will make 50% of a sample of animals die. This is being used to test for the famous Botox cosmetic. And in this case, we know that these types of tests are not really necessary to prevent human suffering. In fact, Singer believes that it would be better to do without them and learn to deal with wrinkles because it's normal to have those as a sign of aging. So the benefits to humans of experimenting on animals too are either non-existent or very uncertain, while the losses to members of other species are certain and real. This emphasizes the moral imbalance between humans and animals, and it also implies that the possible advantages of using animals to conduct studies for human benefit might not complement the damage done to the test subject animals. This perspective also highlights the significance of taking other species' interest and welfare into account and casts doubt on the morality of using animals in scientific research. So let us take a look at the question: would the opponent of experimentation be prepared to let thousands die from a terrible disease that could be cured only by experimenting on one animal? So this question basically asks if someone who is against using animals in experiments would be willing to let thousands of people pass away from an awful illness that had only been proven to be curable by using one animal in experimentation. It is a moral dilemma that calls into question the coherence of their views. Would they remain firm in their opposition to using animals for experiments, even at the expense of human lives? So, how do we know that animals can feel pain if we can never directly experience the pain of another being? So, Peter Singer's basis of belief that animals can feel pain is similar to the basis of his belief that children can feel pain. We just often assume what other people feel through their behavior, and all higher animals, including us humans, possess a fundamental nervous system that evolved in more distant ancestors. Given this anatomical similarity, it is likely that vertebrate animals and humans share a similar sense of feeling. While in the case of bivalves like oysters, mussels, and clams, they don't seem to be capable of feeling pain or any other kind of consciousness. And if they are, then the equal consideration of interest principle does not apply to them. As for plants, it lacks a centrally organized nervous system similar to ours, and none of the arguments we use to support the idea that animals experience pain also applies to them. So next, another question to ponder on is if animals eat each other, why shouldn't we eat them? So we have this thing called the Benjamin Franklin objection, and just a little background information about him is that he was for a time a vegetarian. So when his friends went fishing, he found out that smaller fishes was in another fish's stomach. So then he asked himself, if you eat one another, I don't see why we may not eat you. This also explains the idea of a reasonable creature, in which one can find a reason for whatever one wants to do. Most animals who kill for food would not be able to survive if they did not. And we need to understand nature and develop the best theories we can to explain why things are as they are. Moving on to ethics and reciprocity. In Plato's book entitled The Republic, we found out that to do injustice is by nature good and to suffer injustice is evil. Take note that this was not Plato's own view, but he put it into the mouth of Glaucon in order to allow Socrates, the hero of his dialogue, to refute it. This view of ethics by Plato translates that this does not automatically mean that injustice is truly good in itself. Rather, his point is that while something might seem good or enjoyable at the time, it eventually causes internal conflict and moral deterioration. On the other hand, justice promotes inner harmony and the soul's growth, even though it might involve short-term sacrifice or hardship. In short, he explores the idea that justice is an innate trait in the soul that promotes harmony and well-being, rather than just an external set of laws imposed by society. In assessing this conception of ethics, we should distinguish between the difference of explanations and justifications. So an explanation is a reason for or cause for a particular action or phenomenon. Like for example, humans have supremacy over animals because they are rational and have the ability to rule, whereas justifications just deals with reasoning or morally defending these behaviors. According to Plato, justifications should be based on the pursuit of justice and the well-being of the soul rather than just personal gain or enjoyment. Thus, although an explanation could clarify why humans have power over animals, a justification based on Plato's ethical framework would highlight how this power is in line with the more general ideas of justice and virtue. The origins of ethics tell us nothing about where ethics should end. And whatever its origin, the ethics we have now does go beyond a tacit understanding between beings capable of reciprocity. And according to this, modern ethics go beyond a straightforward understanding or agreement between people who are able to reciprocate actions. However, it recognizes that contemporary ethical frameworks have developed from a wide range of sources such as philosophical, legal, religious, and cultural foundations. These systems go beyond simple reciprocity, as they include intricate moral codes that deal with how all creatures should be treated. This growth is a reflection of the understanding that every person has intrinsic value and dignity, regardless of their capacity to return the favor. Therefore, rather than focusing only on mutual consent, modern ethics seeks to promote the values of justice, compassion, and respect for all living creatures. And this leads to a more inclusive and thorough moral understanding.
Differences between humans and animals. Traditional views of humans and animals as fundamentally different have been challenged by Darwin's theory of evolution. Traditional viewpoints depicted people and animals as essentially different for generation. But this story started to fall apart when Darwin's theory of evolution was established. Darwin's important work challenged the idea that humans are exceptional by pointing to a common ancestor with animals. Attempts to draw lines between humans and animals based on characteristics like tool use or language have failed, as animals also exhibit such behaviors. It has been difficult to distinguish humans from other animals based on characteristics like tool use or language. There have been reports of animals displaying traits thought to be exclusive to animals. This blurs the line of separating humans from other species and undercuts the notions of traits that are unique to humans. Renowned utilitarian philosopher Jeremy Bentham questioned the propriety of utilizing language or tool use as standards for moral judgment. He maintained that the main consideration in deciding how to treat animals should be their ability to suffer. Bentham's position promoted a more broad ethical framework and opposed the conventional anthropocentric viewpoint. Some philosophers argue that self-awareness and autonomy make humans morally superior, but this view was questioned by Singer. Some philosophers claim that because humans possess qualities like autonomy and self-awareness, they're morally superior to animals. Peter Singer, though, disputes this viewpoint. Singer asks whether it is morally acceptable to put human interests ahead of those of other beings, and whether self-aware beings are intrinsically deserving of more respect. The relationship between humans and animals is changing as we perceive it. Our understanding of our place in the natural world has been altered by the theories of evolution put out by Darwin, utilitarian principles by Jeremy Bentham, and ethical questions raised by Singer. Let's work toward treating other people with more compassion and inclusivity as we investigate these complexities further. Singer questions whether self-aware beings inherently deserve greater consideration and whether prioritizing their interests over others is justified. First of all, the claim that human beings merit greater deliberation can be consistent with the equal consideration of interest principle. It must not, however, lead to the disregard of conscious entities' interests who might not be self-aware. Peter Singer argues whether this reasoning justifies giving self-aware individuals desire precedence over those of others and contests the idea that they have intrinsic value over others. Furthermore, Singer emphasizes how inconsistent it is to use self-awareness as a yardstick for moral worth, especially in the context of people with intellectual disabilities who may have differing levels of self-awareness. The claim that self-aware beings deserve more consideration may be compatible with equal consideration of interests, but only if it doesn't lead to disregarding the interests of sentient beings. Singer challenges the idea that there is a moral divide between humans and animals, only on traits like autonomy or self-awareness. He makes the case against applying these characteristics to support unfair treatment, particularly if doing so results in undervaluing some people because of their cognitive capacities. Defending speciesism. First off, it's crucial to remember that some philosophers defend speciesism by claiming that moral value can be derived from membership in a species, either innately or through instrumental means. The instrumental defense of speciesism suggests that a clear species boundary is necessary to prevent a slippery slope towards mistreating humans. According to the instrumental defense of speciesism, upholding a distinct species border is essential to prevent the development of a negative attitude about mistreating humans. Peter Singer, though, presents an alternative viewpoint. He refutes the idea that speciesism has a slippery slope and stresses that his intention is to elevate animals' position rather than lowering that of humans. Rather than sinking into moral abysses, Singer suggests that the rights of all sentient beings be prioritized regardless of their degree or self-awareness. Singer's first criticism of this approach is that it treats people according to the characteristics common to their species. He makes the case why this line of thinking is incorrect and draws attention to the flaws in it. He also challenges the idea that species membership should determine moral significance, akin to racial or gender discrimination. In addition with that, Singer questions the idea that moral worth should be determined by one species, equating it with discrimination based on race or gender, and stressing the need to transcend such limited viewpoints. Bernard Williams, on the other hand, uses tribal impulses to support speciesism by stating the worth of human ideals and unity. Singer, however, challenges Williams' defense, arguing that moral judgment ought to go to above this inclination and center on what is ethically correct rather than merely being in line with one species. Finally, Singer's viewpoint pushes for a more inclusive moral philosophy and challenges us to reevaluate the premises of speciesism. Singer's arguments force us to reconsider speciesism tenets and take into account a more inclusive and ethically sound strategy for our interactions with other living things.
And that is all for our presentation. Thank you so much for listening.